Welcome to Things Hidden. This is our inaugural podcast. It's our new program. We're going to give a deep dive into the principles, the first principles that I integrate in my understanding of politics, culture, all kinds of fields that are plagued by what I call toxic groupthink. And that is the notion that so much of what human beings believe they believe are actually just products of being kind of locked into a feedback loop of groupthink. And that groupthink blinds us. It blinds us in being able to solve problems in the field of medicine and to be able to question long-standing dogmas in the field of nutrition, whether it's in politics, of course, foreign policy, economics, the whole gamut of things that affect our everyday individual lives. They get plagued by this problem of toxic groupthink. And so one of the guiding toolkits that I'll use to help us unpack groupthink and to unpack collectivism is the notion that Rene Girard introduced into history called Memetic Theory or Memetic desire. And I'm going to start this unpacking of Memetic Theory by just diving right into the middle of the gospel text. I'm going to take Mark as my example tonight, and we're going to look at a passage that Jesus has said that has been a puzzling thing for many people to understand. What is he talking about? And I think Rene Girard's Memetic Theory is very helpful in unpacking what exactly is going on in this passage. It's Mark chapter 3, verse 30. We're going to go through probably 25 and on. We'll look at it and try to unpack it. And so I'll just dive in here. It says, "Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute was brought to Jesus, and he healed the man so that he could speak and see. The crowds were astounded and asked, 'Could this be the son of David?' But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, 'Only Beelzebub, the prince of the demons, does this man drive out demons.' So only by Beelzebub. And knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, 'Every kingdom divided against itself will be laid waste, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? And if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons drive them out? So then they will be your judges. But if I drive out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. How can anyone enter a strong man's house and steal his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can plunder his house." So this is an interesting thing, and a lot of people have always been puzzled by this. How can Satan drive out Satan? This is a weird kind of paradoxical mystery. And there's a lot of layers to this, but if we're going to look at it from an anthropological lens, which is the lens that Memetic Theory gives us, we can see some interesting insights from this. First of all, remember that the word Satan in the original language means accuser. So think like special prosecutor or, the state attorney or special counsel. This is the person who's going to make accusations against people within the community. And that is the mode of operation that Satan as an entity, and again, as an anthropological lens, we're not looking into the spiritual side of that question when we talk about Satan. We're only looking at the human parts, right? The human systems, the institutions, culture, that level, right? So we're tabling the spiritual level and the questions that may arise within the text there, and we're looking at the anthropological level. Because, again, if Jesus claims to be, Son of God and Son of Man, Well, Son of God would cover the theological understanding of the biblical text and the stories in it. But if we only have a theology, then we're not going to get the full story of what Jesus is saying he's trying to reveal. The Son of Man title would seem to indicate that he's unlocking the full understanding of what man is and what man has come from and where our culture and humanity is going. And so that would take us into the realm of anthropology, if we're looking at the Son of Man aspect of his claim to authority. So going back to that word Satan, from a human standpoint, Satan is the spirit of the crowd. It's the spirit that has governed human societies since their origins, which is this notion that whenever you have scandal is when we come into conflict with our neighbors over what our neighbors seem to be having. It's what we call covetousness. If we look at the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not covet, all of these different items, but it's always about what the neighbor has, which gives us a clue in that 10th commandment that the emphasis is on the neighbor. The neighbor is the person that you covet. You covet their being, you covet their state of status, their state in the hierarchy of your business or community or whatever your social clique is that you're operating in. You covet them, and it drives you to desire the things that they have, the things that they own, and the even the behaviors that they seem to exhibit. Well, that's where scandal starts. That's where Satan starts chaos brewing. And that's where you can spill out into, if people are fighting and coveting and driven by envy and resentment, that can spill off into tension and deep-seated violence eventually. And that's something that has been something that humanity has wanted to deter since its origins, that we can chart through history and archaeology and those types of disciplines. The desire to prevent out-of-control, contagious, tit-for-tat violence that never seems to have closure, no peace, no closure, no forgiveness. Well, in the satanic kingdom, which again think the word Satan means the crowd, the crowd mind, the giving oneself over to crowd violent passions. So how can Satan drive out Satan? Well, we've seen that. That's what humans have done through history. It starts with scandal, it starts with jealousy and envy, and then it builds up into bad blood within a community. That's the Satan. And then Satan that crowd tension must drive out Satan in order to maintain its kingdom. And so to do that, we have this pattern throughout history of what Girard calls the scapegoat mechanism. And that is when a community is caught up in so much imitation of aggression, imitation of desire for the objects that other people have in the community, that can snowball to such a high-pitched degree that it will stumble into a common enemy. Because if everybody's imitating everybody's finger pointing, that imitational pattern can easily start to slip towards one direction, towards a common threat, a common enemy. And that person is usually an arbitrary person selected, he or she, because they are different in some way. They stand out in a sea of people imitating and copying people and kind of fighting over the same desires. Someone who has an external identity that's different. They're too old, they're handicapped, they're disabled, they're very poor, they're from a different ethnic tribe. There's all kinds of things that could be arbitrarily used as excuses to attack and blame a common enemy. But when that community that's locked up in that toxic groupthink, that toxic sameness of desiring over, whether it could be famine makes food tight and people start fighting and accusing each other of theft, or it could be a sickness, and people start accusing each other of creating bad, energy, or creating a magic spell, and people start accusing people of all kinds of, and if we're talking ancient times, some kind of magic spell might be employed as an accusation that stirs up in a community, and it has to boil into a safety mechanism, or otherwise you're going to have war of all against all, and you're going to exterminate the human species. And so, again, in animal kingdom, they don't have imitation quite to the same degree that our human species has mastered. Animals have a dominance and submission mechanism, and you can see that clearly when you see an alpha wolf defeat a wolf that's contesting his authority in the pack. That beta wolf will submit its neck after it loses and kind of offer his neck, and the superior wolf will usually decline to strike. So there's not this need to, well, I got to get back and kill you because of rivalry or, some kind of vengeance. They don't have that. Humans, we do. We imitate beauty, we imitate forgiveness, but we also oftentimes, more often than not, imitate vengeance and pettiness and that kind of thing. And so all of that maelstrom of groupthink and imitation spills out into a safety mechanism, which is human beings, they look and they say, that person is the witch, that person is the cause of all of our problems, and we're going to expel them so that we can restore our peace, we can get rid of the curse or the bad blood or the famine or the lack of rain or whatever it is that has triggered the pressure and stress to begin with. And when they do that, usually through killing the person, through sometimes in ancient societies, we see this all over the world, ritual cannibalism, which is very gruesome, but it's a fact of human history that we need to take seriously and understand why is it that it's such a ubiquitous feature of our ancient ancestors across the globe, not particularly located in one, region of the globe than another. This is something that communities that don't even interact with each other are practicing, ritual cannibalism. And so, this crowd, this satanic spirit of the crowd of losing one's sense of composure, losing one's sense of, dignity and togetherness, and losing it into passion and whipped up desire. It spills like a collective disease onto a common vessel of wrath. And that is Satan driving out Satan. So that's the accusing spirit of the crowd driving out the accusing spirit. That satanic spirit is, again, this has nothing to do in this context with a religious thing about, someone's possessed by a demon, but rather this is having to do with a spirit of violence and aggression, finding someone who mirrors, in their opinion, their own violent aggression, and then expelling them as a means of creating oneness and togetherness. And this is common sense if you think about it. If you think about, just vestiges of this same kind of social dynamic that happens all the time in a community. We see vestiges of it all the time. Think of two little children, two toddlers, and there's a toy and a playpen or whatever, and one toddler picks it up. The other one automatically wants to play with that toy, even if there's plenty of other toys in the room. They've got to play with the toy that their neighbor has, right? And they'll fight over that toy, even if there's a duplicate toy right next to it. And so when the neighbor grabs the toy out of the first child's hand that had it first, the first child didn't really care about the toy, but now that their neighbor's pulling it away from them, they really want it. And they've incited desire, so now they're pulling back harder, and they're saying, "Why are you taking it from me? It's mine." And we see this is so common in human experience, and you can see how that's the imitation of that can, this is a child example, it's innocent, but this is a small scale example of what Jesus is dealing with on the anthropological level of human society. He's saying this is the Satan, not this children literally, but this is a scale of it, of wanting the same object, right? Of coveting your neighbor, trying to imitate your neighbor to the point of trying to desire what they're desiring. And that can spill off into aggression, where sometimes toddlers will start pushing and stuff and hurting each other or crying or what have you. And then, maybe a puppy dog comes along and they start pulling the tail, and that diffuses the tension. So there's your scapegoat. A little puppy dog comes by, and all of a sudden they forgot about each other's obsession about the toy, and now they see something that's more different than both of them, the little dog, and it's got a cute little fluffy tail, and they both want to poke on it and see what happens. And that's a really innocent scale version of the scapegoat mechanism of Satan driving out Satan. Satan begins with imitation and a loss of self and a loss of distinction between neighbors, and that causes jealousy and envy. And then, in order to not make that go crazy, it ends in, well, we're poking on somebody else. We're grabbing someone's tail or whatever, puppy dog tail or something, and making them the objects of our fascination. That kind of makes us forget of our personal squabbles. This happens all the time. It happens with war, right? Where wars, countries are in tension. There's economic pressures. There's ethnic divisions, all kinds of things brewing that are creating some tension. And all of a sudden, somebody comes along on the world stage that makes a great scapegoat, and so they bind together in a kind of sacred transcendence of, well, I don't like you, but let's roll up our sleeves and let's go off to war to destroy this monster. And it creates what? It creates a sense of sacred awe and a sacred beauty that is a real felt experience, a real psychological phenomena that has been with humans for so long. But the question that Jesus poses is, if it's divided, if the satanic system, which is the human system of dealing with conflict, of dealing with desire and envy in a way that tries to manage people's sense of self, so people don't feel like they're losing their sense of self in imitation. And so humans have managed it by expelling a common enemy who has so much difference, arbitrarily at least, that they can be a vessel of blame. And everybody truly believes it, by the way. How can such a kingdom that's divided against it stand? That's what Jesus is asking. And so he's giving us a clue as to what's going to happen when he talks about the hour of Satan that's coming soon, when he himself is going to be given over to the authorities of his time. So he calls that the hour of Satan, his passion, when he's going to be arrested by the authorities of his community and then tried in this process, and then ultimately executed, right? He's saying this is the hour of Satan. So remember, use that word. You try to get the cartoon version of a red monster with horns out of your head, because that'll block you from seeing what is really going on, which is so profound and has such an impact in our daily life today. So Jesus is saying the hour of Satan is coming. It's upon him. And so what he's alluding to is this idea that at some point, Satan, the satanic spirit, takes over the community to the point where the high priest leader, Caiaphas, says it's better that one man die than the whole nation perish. So there you go. Just in case you were thinking the scapegoat mechanism was just something made up. I mean, it's written in one sentence right there. It's better, right? That the idea is, the logic is, it's better that one person takes the hit than our whole community perish, right? Our whole community perishing is the crisis that will happen in Caiaphas's mind if Jesus is allowed to preach his radical love kingdom message, and he's afraid that will stir up an uprising sentiment within the Jewish community at the time that would cause Rome to come hard down on the people and really clamp down and really do a number on people in a very brutal way. So from Caiaphas' standpoint, the high priest saying this sentence, it's better that one man die than the whole nation perish, it's very logical from his standpoint. Jesus is a troublemaker. Jesus is stirring the pot. Jesus is looking a lot more different than a lot of the other folks around town, right? He stands out in a sea of sameness relative to him. I mean, Jesus is doing all kinds of stuff. He's hanging out with tax revolters and tax collectors. He's hanging out with prostitutes. He's hanging out with people who are sick. He's hanging out with people who he's healed from demon possession. I mean, he's breaking all the boundaries. He's hanging out with the rich. He knows how to recline at table, which is a kind of thing that rich people did, a tradition of a certain way of decorum and so on. So he's moving up and down the hierarchy. He's making friends with the rich and the poor alike. He's calling people out of toxic groupthink, helping them rediscover their human dignity and their sacred image that God has in them, made in his own image. And so he's a clear, easy differentiation from the rest of the community. And therefore, he is disturbing the peace of how Satan has maintained peace in all human systems, which is when the crowd has too much jealousy. Think about it. You've got the high priest Caiaphas, so you've got Pharisees, you've got Sadducees, you've got Zealots, you've got Essenes, you've got all kinds of different groups and factions within this ancient community. And then you have this Jesus thing happening, and this stirring up thousands of people. Crowds are swelling, and he's saying things that are making everybody look bad and blending the lines of who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. That's a crisis of undifferentiation that's being opened up. That's a moment where people are feeling to lose their sense of self. Up until this point, they thought bad guys were people who were cursed with deformities or handicap or demon possession or leprosy or Samaritans, right? And he's saying, no, all the people you've cast out as unclean, I'm restoring them and saying God's with them. God loves them. The highest meaning of beauty and goodness that you see in God, God sees in them. And that's creating a sense of loss of self for the people in the in crowd of his community, because they're, without those measuring sticks, without the community scapegoats, how can they have their own sense of, well, we are these people, we are not sick, we're righteous, we're clean, we're doing the right things, so therefore we're on God's side. So, in Caiaphas's perspective, he has every reason to, and from his way of looking, which has been the way of the world, he has a logical reason to want to expel Jesus. Not saying it's true or right, but from his vantage point, it's it makes sense from the satanic Satan casting out Satan perspective. And so that's what Jesus calls the hour of Satan. It's the moment where people are losing their sense of self in rivalry, in a loss of self, and now they need to expel a common enemy, which happens to be Jesus himself. But what we'll see in future episodes is that when they expel Jesus, it's not going to be the same old order. What Jesus says, how can a kingdom that's divided against itself stand? That question is going to be fulfilled in his own persecution. We're going to find out why that kingdom didn't stand, because when they killed Jesus, it unlocked something about the nature of this Satan casting out Satan mechanism that had ruled the world for all over communities for thousands of years. It's what allowed our species to not go extinct, but now Jesus is going to unmask it and then drive it out of history. And that's what you and I are a part of right now. We're enthralled by the personhood revolution that Jesus inaugurated over 2,000 years ago. And there is so much that we can be excited to learn as we unpack this in future editions of our new program, Things Hidden. I'm David Gornoski. Email me, david@aneighborschoice.com, and we will talk again soon.